Welcome back everybody to part 2 of our video series of how to create your own anxiety support groups. This is from www.anxietysupportgroupsonline.com and I'm Mike Kingston. You can get a lot more information and our free downloadable report with a setup template for your own group from our website. Okay, we spoke earlier about the why would you want to set up your own group and what are you trying to do, and this is about how you go about doing it. As we said, we've already defined the group in outline, what our group's going to be called, who specifically it's for, and that means not just a sort of demographic of the population you'd like to attend, but specifically what condition or conditions you're going to focus upon trying to help and support. You want to be clear about what you want the group to do. Is it going to be a political group to try and improve health services in the local area? Is it going to be a group that does small group work, for example using online CBT resources to help people set goals and change behaviours? Whatever it is, you need to be clear about that one. And also you'll have defined where you're going to meet, when, how often and how long each meeting will be for. Now we need to create a specific action plan. So the first thing to decide is, do you need some help in setting up this group? It's a big task, there's a lot of activities, and it's going to be quite a lonely, difficult job if you're doing it on your own. You may well find that getting some help from one or two like-minded people who have also got the time, energy and motivation will be very useful. And if you do need some help, how can you get that help? Well, the usual suspects are the first port of call. Have you got any family or friends who would like to help? What about colleagues at work? Just ask around, get the word out if you're from likely people, and see if you can see what comes up. You can also approach local professionals, for example, your doctor or your mental health worker or voluntary organisations, and also other support groups to see if there are people there who would be particularly interested in your group. But one of the things you may well find is that other support groups may actually have members who aren't quite getting the support for their specific condition that they're hoping, and maybe more interested in yours, and they can be a rich source of support and help for you in getting your group off the ground. The other place to remember is online groups. There's a lot of forums, sort of bulletin boards, and also specific email type groups, for example Google groups, where you may find that you'll have members who live in your local area and will be willing to help. Now you need to decide on the format of your meetings. We've already set up, we know what our meeting is going to focus upon, how long it's going to be, and we need to set a structure for the meetings so that they actually run efficiently and effectively and actually give value to all the attendees. What kind of meeting do you want? Is it going to be a meeting where you do small group work, one where people set goals for the coming week and review where they were last week, how much progress they've made, their setbacks, their challenges, and set goals and behavioural objectives for the next week? Is it going to be a reflection or a discussion group? What about just a straight socialising group? Nothing more specific than that. Or perhaps you might want to have an educational session with talks and presentations from specialists or people who are experiencing the same sort of problems as other members of the group, and they might want to share personal experiences, things that have worked for them, things that haven't worked for them. You may want to get specialists in to give specific instruction to members of the group and trainings. And you might want to have question and answer sessions. Just have a think it over and come up with some goals for the meetings so that you can structure the group and set up a specific meeting format. Now, whatever meeting format you're going to have, it's important that you start the meetings correctly. So you need to have an introductory session. This forms the group, it gets the group to gel, people to know each other, to start to feel comfortable, particularly when you're first joining the group, when the group's first setting up. A lot of people will be very uncomfortable with each other. They won't have that level of trust that's possibly needed for a group to be supportive and to gel together. And if you can find activities and have an introductory session that achieves this forming of the group, you'll be much more successful. Probably the critical thing about this stage is that people are introduced, especially if a new person is joining a group that's already in existence. They often feel very on edge and isolated until they've been accepted into the organisation. You need to set the agenda and the time frames for the meeting and give out any announcements. Once you've done this, then you can actually go on to the sessions, and you want to structure your sessions by allocating fairly strict time slots to items on the agenda. What you can pretty much guarantee is that these time slots will overrun, and as a general principle, you want to have fewer longer sessions than more shorter ones. A rule of thumb is that most sessions will overrun by up to 50%, and so the concept of less is more is a principle that's well worth sticking to. If you've got a lot of material you want to cover, it's much better to spread this out as a sort of series over a number of meetings rather than trying to rush through it in one meeting and find that nobody gets very much value out of it. Once you've been through the actual meat of the meeting, then of course it's important to close the session. Again, this is important to make people feel that they've got value out of the session, and also to understand what's happening next. It's a good idea to summarise the current meeting, including any homework that might have been agreed, also work that people are going to take on in between meetings and before the next meeting. You want to announce in the next meeting when it is, where it is, and what's on the agenda. And then you want to perhaps give people the opportunity to ask any questions. After the meeting's closed, you may want to have a time slot allocated before the room has to be cleared for informal socialising. This can be of great value for the groups to really get to know each other and break down some of those interpersonal barriers. This is a sample format for a meeting with timings. This will be a roughly 2-hour meeting. So to spend 10 minutes on the introductions and announcements, 20 minutes doing some small group work, which would simply be a review of individuals' progress over the past 7 days in small groups, the good points and the bad points, and the room for improvement, where improvement needs to be made. Then you might want to have bring the whole group together for a group discussion and question and answer session for about 20 minutes, followed by a 10-minute coffee break. Then breaking up again to small group work for the next week, where a goal-setting exercise for behavioural goals over the coming 7 days will be undertaken. After that's been finished, 30 minutes later, you have a quick 10-minute closing session, briefly summarising the meeting, setting next week's agenda, any questions will be fielded at this point, and then perhaps have 20 minutes before clear up for some informal socialising. So that's just a sample agenda meeting format. You can set yours up in any way that suits you, but be clear, less is more, and be quite clear about your timings. Okay, once you've actually got your first meeting, or maybe your first series of meetings structured on paper, and you know what you're actually going to be doing, next thing is to get the word out. You need to do some marketing. How are you going to do that? Well, obviously the first thing is to speak to anyone you know who may be interested, who may have a need for this kind of group, and see if you can get them to come along. Friends, colleagues, obviously important, but also speak to local professionals, perhaps nip down to the doctor's surgery, nip down to social services, look at some voluntary organisations, see if they'll ask for volunteers, perhaps they'll let you put notices up. You may want to actually advertise formally, although this can be quite expensive, and that might be better to wait until you've got your group up and running and maybe have some funds. Direct marketing is always helpful. If you print up some leaflets, that can be done at home on a home computer if it's only a small number of leaflets, either to be put through people's doors or more likely to be put on notice boards in public places where people might see this. You might also want to consider advertising local radio stations or perhaps in the local newspapers. Very often there are free papers which will give free announcements and free space to local voluntary and self-help groups. Sometimes you may have to pay a small fee, and that's something to just bear in mind. Online advertising is another source, particularly again going to your bulletin boards, your online groups, where you can find members with the same sort of problem, and if you put a notice up on those bulletin boards in whatever format the group actually recommends, you may well find you can get local members that way. Okay, so that's a very brief outline. Your group's now up and running. You've got a clear meeting format. You know what you're doing. You know when you're doing it. So you know when your meeting is, and you've got the word out. The next thing you can do, the only really thing you can do right this moment, is go for it. See what happens at the meeting. Make sure that everybody has fun. Make it enjoyable, and let the group take the process on from there. You'll have an idea about where you think it should go, but remember, all groups form themselves in their own unique way depending upon their individual members, and you may well find your group goes in a direction totally unexpected. The important thing is, if it's fun and enjoyable, it will give positive support to all group members. If it's no fun, if they're not having any enjoying it, they get little value out of it, and if they get little value out of it, the group will fail. So have fun and take care. If you want more information and you want to download our free report on setting up your own group, remember you can always visit our website www.anxietysupportgroupsonline.com.